Every evening when the city lights began to flicker and the noise of traffic slowly faded into the rhythm of night, a small golden dog would quietly sit outside a restaurant on the corner of Maple Street. He never barked, never begged for food. He only sat with his tired eyes fixed on the glass door, as if waiting for someone who never came back. The waiters and customers had grown used to his silent presence. Some pitied him, some ignored him, and others threw him leftovers out of sympathy. But to Emma, the young waitress who worked the evening shift, he was more than just a stray dog. There was something about his gaze that carried a strange kind of sorrow, as if his soul remembered a love it had lost. If you believe that kindness and second chances can change lives, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, because this story is going to remind you how one small act of compassion can reveal an entire world of miracles. Emma was in her late 20s, a hard-working woman trying to survive in a world that seemed to forget the gentle hearts. She worked double shifts at the restaurant to pay off her late mother's hospital bills. Her life was a cycle of exhaustion and quiet loneliness. Every night as she cleared tables, she would glance at the golden dog sitting by the door, unmoving, patient. One rainy evening when the restaurant was closing and the streets were almost empty, she saw him still sitting there, soaked and shivering. Something inside her broke. Without thinking, she grabbed a piece of bread, wrapped it in a napkin, and stepped outside into the cold rain. She placed the food near him, but instead of eating, he looked at her, eyes filled with gratitude and a kind of silent trust. The next few nights, Emma made sure he had food. She began keeping small portions aside for him, and even named him Buddy. Over time, he began wagging his tail whenever he saw her, but never crossed the invisible line between them. He would eat only after she went back. Inside, as if afraid to get too close, Emma often wondered where he came from and why he always stayed in the same spot. The curiosity started growing stronger inside her until one evening, when her shift ended early, she made a decision that would change everything. She followed him. Buddy began walking down the quiet lanes, his paws splashing through puddles. Emma kept her distance, but her heart was racing. He crossed the road, went past the grocery store, and turned into a small abandoned neighborhood near the river. The houses there looked lifeless, their windows broken, their walls covered in ivy. Buddy stopped in front of one small wooden house whose gate hung crookedly. He looked back once at Emma, as if checking if she was still there, and then slowly walked inside through a broken door. Emma hesitated for a moment, then followed quietly. What she saw made her heart stop. Inside the cold, dark house in one corner lay an old woman wrapped in a thin blanket, breathing faintly. Beside her were empty cans of food and a small bowl of water. Buddy walked up to her and licked her hand gently. The woman stirred weakly and whispered something Emma could not hear. The realization hit Emma like a storm. This dog had been coming to the restaurant every day, not for himself, but for the woman lying here. He had been bringing her whatever scraps he could find, keeping her alive. Tears filled Emma's eyes as she knelt beside the woman. She was thin, frail, and clearly unwell. Emma quickly called for an ambulance and waited with them both until help arrived. Buddy refused to leave the woman's side, his eyes filled with fear as strangers lifted her onto a stretcher. Emma whispered softly that everything would be okay. That night, she stayed at the hospital while doctors treated the woman for malnutrition and dehydration. The nurses told her that if Emma had not found her in time, she might not have survived another day. Over the next few days, Emma visited the hospital regularly. The old woman's name was Margaret, and when she finally gained enough strength to speak, she told Emma her story. She had once owned Buddy. After her husband's death, she had lost her home and ended up living in that abandoned house. Buddy had stayed with her through it all. When her condition worsened, he began leaving every day to find food. Margaret never knew where he went, but always prayed he would come back safe. When Emma told her how Buddy had been sitting outside the restaurant every evening, Margaret wept silently. She said that the last thing she told him before she collapsed was to go find help. Emma realized then that the dog's daily visits were not just habits, but desperate attempts to save his owner. That realization touched something deep inside her. She decided to take care of Margaret after she was discharged. She arranged a small apartment for her near the restaurant and promised to help with her meals and medicines. Buddy was always by her side, his loyalty unshaken. The entire staff at the restaurant grew fond of him, and even the manager allowed him to stay inside. the back area during cold nights. The story of the loyal dog spread around the town. Soon everyone knew about the golden stray who saved his owner's life. Weeks passed, and Emma noticed how Margaret and Buddy filled the emptiness she once carried. Her evenings no longer felt lonely, her laughter came easily now. Margaret often told her she reminded her of her own daughter who had moved abroad years ago and lost touch. For Emma, it felt like she had found the family she never had. Life began to bloom again in small ways, and every time she looked at Buddy, she saw not just a dog but a symbol of unconditional love. But life had one more test waiting. One night, a fire broke out in Margaret's apartment building due to a faulty heater. By the time Emma reached the place, firefighters were already trying to control the flames. The neighbors said an old woman was still inside. Emma's heart nearly stopped. She screamed for Margaret. But before anyone could react, Buddy darted into the burning building. The firefighters tried to stop him, but he was gone in seconds. Everyone watched helplessly as the fire roared higher. Minutes later, one of the rescuers came out carrying Margaret in his arms, and behind them limped Buddy, his fur burned, his breathing heavy. Margaret survived, but Buddy was severely injured. The doctors did everything they could, but his body had taken too much. He passed away the next morning quietly as Emma held his paw, tears streaming down her face. Even in his final moments, he looked peaceful, as if knowing his purpose was fulfilled. Margaret held Emma's hand and whispered that Buddy had given them both a second chance at life. After Buddy's passing, Emma arranged a small memorial outside the restaurant where he used to sit. She placed his photo there with a small note that read, "He waited not for food, but for love, and gave it back 100 times more." People from all over the town came to pay their respects, some bringing flowers, others leaving treats for stray dogs. It became a place where strangers paused for a moment of kindness. Emma often sat there in the evenings watching the sunset just like Buddy used to. She realized that the dog had taught her something no human ever could, that love asks for nothing but gives everything, that sometimes even the smallest creatures carry the biggest hearts. The restaurant owner later named the place Buddy's Diner in his honor, and a small statue of a golden dog was placed by the door where he once waited. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let this story remind us all that loyalty and love still exist even in the quiet corners of the world. Before you go, please comment below and tell us what part of Buddy's story moved you the most, because somewhere out there, another heart is waiting to believe in kindness again. And as the years passed, whenever the evening lights came on and the city grew silent, people swore they could still see the faint shadow of a golden dog sitting by the door, his eyes gentle and patient, guarding the place that once gave him hope.